Hello everyone, welcome to today's program on nematode management in tomato. My name is Joe Masabni. I am the small acreage extension vegetable specialist located at Dallas, Texas. If you've ever dug your plants at the end of the season and saw something like this, instead of the nice long hairy roots, you'll see on them little beads or warts or nodules or whatever. That is not normal. This is a root knot nematode damage. The only plants that you want to see nodules on them are the bean families, because that's where the bacteria is located that fixes the nitrogen from the air for the bean plants. But except for the bean family, like your beans and peas, every other plant that has those same nodules, something like you see here, is a problem and something you want to avoid. Now, as a reminder, this presentation is not a comprehensive analysis and a compendium on root knot nematode. It is just a brief summary on the topic. Root knot nematodes, I'm aware of 3 species of Meloidogyne. That's the scientific name, Meloidogyne, that are a problem in vegetables. Okay, root knot nematodes are sedentary, means they move, and they say an inch in 1 year. So basically they're sedentary. Obligate mean they must attach to the plant to cause a problem. And they need that attachment to multiply. And they're particularly difficult to control because they have a wide host. So not just today's focus is on tomatoes, but you've seen it on many other vegetables. Short generation time, for example, like in a few days they can multiply, they go to maturity and multiply, versus grasshopper that can be, let's say, a month. And they have high reproductive rates. So those 3 things make it a very difficult. Plus it is attached inside the root, not on the surface. So you need something that will get there to that exact spot. For example, if you were to use a chemical to control it. Okay. Among the big range of vegetables that are affected by root knot nematodes, tomato is a very good host to all the major 3 tropical root knot nematode species. There's additional information that in this publication and by University of Florida that you see the link here. It's a very good one to read with nice pictures. And you can search root knot nematode tomato, those keywords, and you can find lots of good references online. So, in general, the mere presence of root knot nematode is an indication that you have a serious problem, not just the root knot nematode itself, that a lot of other things had to work together to get to this stage. Okay? You will have a serious problem, or the potential to have a serious problem, if you have sandy soils with a history of that disease, and especially in the fall, because in the fall the soil temperature are the highest, and the combination of high soil temperature, sandy soils, and presence of that nematode tells you that you're going to have a potential for a serious problem. And then you'll see why the soil temperature is an issue later on today. Okay, at very high levels of infection or infestation with root knot nematode, the plants may be killed. When does this happen? If you, for example, you followed tomato with a tomato, double cropping, tomato in the spring and then tomato in the fall. And that is why crop rotation is very important, and we will talk about that also today. So when you're transplanting, the older transplants are known to tolerate better the presence of root knot nematode than the youngest seedlings. So, okay, keep that in mind. And as a homeowner, buying an older transplant that even has starting to have flowers on it, and it's 2 foot long, is not a problem. This is not a garbage plant. This is still a good plant. Dig a trench, bury most of it, and then leave the tip 6 inches above ground, and all that stem that you buried will become a root. And that's an older transplant that will improve your chances of tolerating higher soil population of rootknot nematode. Okay, so the symptoms and yield reductions are directly related to pre-plant infestation, meaning that the higher the infestation at planting time, the higher the yield reduction, and the earlier the symptoms are. The lower the infestation, the lower the yield. And sometimes it's so low that you may not notice unless you're taking records and tracking your yields, and then you realize that last year I was getting 20 pounds per plant. How come I got 10 pounds? You may think it's environmental conditions or this or that, but hey, pull the plants and check the roots, and that's always the best approach to determine if you have rootknot nematode. Okay, and because rootknot nematode are, sedentary, they don't move from one area. Usually the damage is localized. So if you have a large field or even in a raised bed, you may find at one end of the raised bed your yield is poor, and then the other end is fine. Okay. So the best time to examine your roots is when problem first is suspected, and wouldn't hurt to pull up your plant and sacrifice one tomato, even if it's in May when they look small, like one raised bed, all the plants look smaller than the other raised bed, and that's when it's a clue. You suspect something, sacrifice 1 or 2 plants, dig them up and look at the roots. Because the earlier you dig them up and throw them away, the better your success at reducing the population, because you did not let it sit there for 2 or 3 months and multiply and multiply and multiply. Okay, and of course the other good time to examine root is at final harvest, when it is always recommended the minute you pick the last fruit, pull the plant and clean that raised bed, or clean your garden from all extra plants. So the theme of this presentation is rootknot nematode management, not eradication or control. You just have to learn to live with them, and these 11 ideas we talked today are to keep them below economic threshold level, meaning below the level where they cause serious damage and affect you or kill your plants. The first one, that's easy. Think pre-plant management. Is it there? What can I do? And everything else that you'll see today is that approach. What can I do to reduce that population number in the soil before I put my transplant in? Approach number 2 is crop rotation. Remember the double cropping I mentioned earlier? If you plant tomato in the spring and tomato in the fall, if you started to have problems in the spring, the tomato in the fall will suffer a lot. Soil temperature is high, you have very high population of rootknot nematodes, and the plant is also sensitive to it because of the high temperatures, the stress and all that comes with the high temperature of planting in the summer for a fall crop. So what is a good rotation? You may have seen this from my other presentation. Here on the left is an example of a good rotation. You'll see that in every year and within year we're switching between families of crops. Like these 6 here are 6 different families, versus here on the right, where tomato and potato are the same family, even though the crop name is different. That means if I had a little bit of rootknot nematode here, they had only the spring season to multiply, but 2.5 years were lower chance of feeding them with the same tomato crop. So between tomato and tomato, between year 1 and year 4, when you start the cycle again, you have 5 crops and 2.5 years where you are trying to reduce the population of root knot nematode, versus here on the right, between tomato and tomato again, in year 4, you had 2 crops and 2 years instead of 2.5 years. So basically a higher risk, much higher risk. And with root knot nematode, you have a small amount that you start with here. The chance of having a serious amount in year 4 is much higher in this situation than here in the good rotation. Okay, so in in line with thinking about a rotation is the point number 3, which is the use of poor or non-host cover crops. We always suggest, and when I give my classes to homeowner, commercial growers, beginning farmers, is that you should never let your soil sit idle. Crop cover crop, crop cover crop, whatever you need. And especially if you are using a non-host cover crop, then not only you are keeping the soil healthy and cutting that cover crop and feeding it into the soil and adding all kind of good microorganisms, but you're also reducing the population of the pathogenic microorganisms and the root knot nematode. And this presentation here, this slide here gives you example of non-host cover crops like iron clay cowpea, sun hemp, hairy indigo, American joint veg, etc. Okay, or if you can afford it, if you have a large field, go into a 6 to 9 year long-term rotation with as a pasture land, like digit grass, Bahia grass, Bermuda grass, etc. That is not possible for a homeowner, this type, but any one of these will be perfect. Any one of these 4 choices will be great to include as a cover crop part of your rotation. So let's look closely about this 4-year rotation. So think of it as this 4-year or 4 beds at the same time. So think of any month here. In this bed in February you have potatoes. In this bed you have cold crops or greens. In this bed, what's in February? You have garlic, and in this bed you have cabbage. Or the same bed, and you start here and follow the arrow, follow the arrow, and follow the arrow. So we're going counterclockwise. So, and the names highlighted in red are a cover crop. And the date is the planting date and harvest date. So for example, potato, in February, out by May, followed by snap bean from May through July, followed by a cover crop, July to August, instead of letting it sit idle in those 2 months. And then in the fall you plant garlic, and then next year you pull the garlic out in May, etc., etc., etc. So follow this is how you follow it. So cabbage in September, out by March, and then followed tomato, etc. So you'll see this is a beautiful rotation, and you can adjust it depending on where you are. Like these are not fixed dates, because some location planting potato may be earlier or later. So adjust the dates for your location. But it's a beautiful rotation because you'll see crop cover crop, lots of cover crop, or solarization, which is another approach that I will talk about. You never let it sit idle. And you can include one of these poor host cover crop, or those cover crop that are known to reduce the number of root knot nematode. That is a great way, great approach. Okay, so we've set 3 so far. Approach number 4 is control your weeds. If you have nutsedge, we know that nutsedge is a host for root knot nematode. So if you have a serious infestation of nutsedge, there you have a higher potential of having root knot nematode for the tomato you plant in the same bed. So remove those weeds. Clean fallow means even if you have to leave it empty, that raised bed or that garden empty, don't let the weeds grow uncontrolled. Whenever they get 3 to 4 inches tall, disc it. Keep it clean. Keep that garden clean, that raised bed or that garden clean of weeds, because we know that now item number 4, approach number 4, tells you that weeds, some of them are host for root knot nematode. I like approach number 6, which is use of resistant varieties of tomatoes. Let nature fight for you instead of you are fighting root knot nematode. Plant a variety of tomato that is itself resistant to root knot nematode, and I'll give you an example. But a caveat to this advice is do not plant that resistant variety in the same place year after year, because you may select for resistant nematodes that will go with that resistant variety. So there are lots of choices of resistant varieties. Don't plant the same one. Okay, and not only tomato, but peppers, southern pea, sweet potatoes. You can find resistant varieties for all these crops, even corn. Now remember, resistance is not immunity, meaning you will expect some reduction, but at least not total plant loss and 100% yield loss. We know that resistance in the plant is due to one gene called MI gene, but the MI gene is inactive at high soil temperatures above 78. Other people say 82. Remember when I said double cropping? Why, if you start tomato in the spring and tomato in the fall, that's bad, especially if you start with a high population of nematode. Well, because the high soil temperature in the fall or summer, by August, the soil temperature already in the 90s, then that gene is inactive in the plant. And even though you plant in the fall a resistant variety, you may still find damage or even complete loss, depending on the situation. That is why spring planting is better than fall planting for tomato if you have an issue of a serious root knot nematode. And this figure shows you that that a plant that has that gene that is called nematode resistant is highly resistant when the soil temperature is up to 82. The other slide mentioned 78. But as the temperature goes higher than 82, there's diminishing level of resistance, and the plants can be fully susceptible when your soil temperature is up to 89 Fahrenheit. Okay. So here is a list of resistant tomato varieties, and the one highlighted in black are known to be hybrids with that MI gene. And this is through normal breeding technique, traditional breeding techniques, not GMO. If you are worried that this is GMO, no, this is normal breeding techniques. Okay, and whether it's large tomato variety or medium size or paste or cherry tomatoes, things like that. So, but whenever you go online and you search or you look in the catalog, look for those letters that are following the name or are included in the description of that variety. And many websites are now becoming details. You click on the link and it'll, like the information button, and next to the letters, and it'll tell you what they mean. And N is for nematodes. So you want to select a variety that has N next to the name or part of the description for that hybrid variety. So for example, Better Boy has VFN. Big Beef has a longer list. Celebrity, that's very popular, have Fusarium, nematode, tobacco mosaic virus, and verticillium. So that's and Mountain Spring, Pora Improved, Roma does not have the end letter. So you're taking a gamble planting these in a soil that's infected with root knot. There are root knot nematode resistant peppers like Carolina Bell and Carolina Wonder. Okay, let's back to management suggestions. Number 7 is flooding. I mean, if you can afford it, you have a raised bed and you don't want to plant in the summer, water is cheap and it's available, flood that and drain it, and flood and dry it, and flood and dry it. But that gets to be too expensive. It's easier to put a cover crop that is a non-host or can reduce your nematode population. Advice number 8 is immediately clean your garden, your field, your raised bed after the final harvest. Immediately. The minute you remove that last fruit from a tomato, that tomato plant is a weed. You're not feeding from it, but the insects and the diseases and root knot nematodes are still feeding on it, and they're multiplying and may cause you future headaches in the future. Okay, that's always good advice, whether you have a root knot nematode or not. Immediately clean your field, your raised bed after the final harvest. Advice number 9 is solarization, which is best on heavier soils. In detail, solarization is like you see here on this large garden area. A lot of water, clear plastic, not this is white, that's the angle of the photo. This is clear plastic, lots of water in the soil, flood it, cover it, and for 4 to 6 weeks during the sunniest part of the year. Okay, and here is solarization on the raised bed. You see, again, this is clear plastic, not white like you see here. Tons of water, I mean flooded. That raised bed was flooded, and you see how we put some soil on around the edge to trap that steam under that plastic. And temperatures can easily reach 128, and you see beads on the bottom side of the plastic. This thermometer, soil thermometer, was put under the plastic, and you see water droplets on the bottom. That's when you know it's changing into steam. And actually, I did a small trial in 2012, and here are the average temperature, average over a 32-day period, over a whole day. This is air temperature, the one in green. The middle bar is the soil temperature of the non-solarized. This is just, and I'm surprised that around 4 or 5 o'clock the soil temperature can reach up to 120. But when you're adding that water and adding that clear plastic, that same area, soil temperature reach 180. 180 Fahrenheit day after day after day will kill everything. Your insect eggs, your small weed seeds, good microorganisms, microorganisms, and root knot nematode will reduce that pressure a lot. Okay, and here's a proof. This is a 10 by 10 square foot area, and this is solarized bed. The picture was taken 83 days after I removed the plastic. You see very few weeds that started to come back compared to the non-solarized bed, lots of weeds. And these are the same 2 beds taken the following early spring, 200 days after I removed the plastic. You see, you have few weeds, but everything that you see here are deep-rooted perennials. And if you count them, there's probably 10-15 weeds, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Whereas the non-solarized bed, there's probably 1,000 weeds and 10,000 seeds ready to reseed that bed. So solarization works, and what you see best is the weed control, but it's also working on your nematode population. Approach number 10 is grafting, and I recently gave a presentation on Facebook Live on tomato grafting, so look it up and go over the detail. Basically, you graft the tomato on a resistant rootstock. So it's a preparation, the scion. So this is the part that you want. The bottom part of the scion is garbage, and you insert into the clip. So that's what you need. You need a clip and your nice razor blade to make a clean cut. And you insert that into the rootstock stem, and you cover it for minimum 3-4 days. And once it heals, You see here the cut heels and the clip. As the plants get bigger, and it pushes the clip out, and it's ready to plant outside. There are rootstocks that are resistant to root knot nematode. And we did a trial in 2018, and we also observed that those same rootstock confer cold tolerance to your vegetable plants. So here is HM 1823. 3 out of 36 plants died because we got 2 cold nights after planting in the field, and 1 or 0 plants died that were grafted. Tomato, Tam, Hot Thai, 13 out of 36, a third of the plants died because of very low temperature, but only 3 or 4 died out of 36. Definitely an effect of that graft. And we also observed an increase in yield. We know that. That's what, like from 263 to 456, almost double the yield due to grafting. But most importantly, Estamino and Maxifort are known to be resistant to nematode. So again, plant a resistant variety like Celebrity, or if you can, grafted and planted, let the rootstock also work for you. Okay. And those are my 11 advices for you. And the number 12 and the best one is don't be the eternal optimist. If whatever you do, that raised bed continues to have issues. Let's say you have some problems in the spring, you solarize, or you plant a cover crop, and in the fall it's really bad. Don't be the eternal optimist and think that it's gonna get better. Dig it up, dig up that raised bed and throw it away, and for $30 buy another yard of compost and refill the bed and start fresh. That is the best advice I can give you all. Thank you very much. Have a great day.